Great. Good morning, everyone. I am so excited to see so many people here interested in learning more about security. My name is Linda Hall, and I'm a program manager on the security team. I've been at Salesforce now for over 2 years, and one of my fondest memories was the first time I came to Dreamforce, and I volunteered at the admin cafe, and I spent days and days talking to customers. And I got to tell you, your energy, your passion about our product is just something that made me realize I was so fortunate to come to Salesforce, and I'm still here. So I just want to thank you all. I'm excited to be here today to talk to you about security. It's something really important to us. I lead a program at Salesforce called the Salesforce Secure Development Lifecycle. It's a massive program we have underway that's a partnership with all of our engineers throughout the company to provide them with better education, better training, better technology, better tools so they can continue doing and creating that great product that you're used to experiencing and do it in a way that's secure. And now Garrett will introduce himself.
So I'm Garrett Piccioni. I'm a senior security engineer here at Salesforce. I've been with the company for about 3 years. My primary focus, though, is on infrastructure security, specifically in our corporate and our IT space. I'm also responsible for the security posture of any of our outsourced vendors, as well as the network security here at Dreamforce. So I've been here all week long trying to make sure that the Dreamforce network and environment is as safe for you guys as possible.
So I got to tell you, one of the best parts of my job is that I get to work with all these great security engineers on our team. We have a really large team, and they're awesome. So thanks, Garrett, for being here with me today. So you'll probably see a lot of these during your time at Dreamforce. This is our forward-looking statement. We don't want you to make any purchasing decisions based on what may or may not be available in the future. Make your decisions based on what's available right now. So the key takeaway from our talk is going to be there are 3 core actions that you can take to improve the security of your Salesforce org. It's very, very basic. We want to keep it really simple at the beginning. We're going to go into more detail later on, but there are 3 things we have. There's the security health check. It's built into Salesforce. We'll talk about that in a bit. Then we have two-factor authentication. Hopefully everybody knows about two-factor authentication, but it really is the thing you can do with the greatest impact to improve the security of any account you have, and especially for your Salesforce org. And the third thing is log and IP ranges. Again, all these 3 things together will improve the security of your org. And I bet you guys know the answer to this question, why security? You're here, you know security really matters. But I'm going to kind of go over some of these key points. So in case you need to persuade some of your colleagues and explain to folks why security matters, you'll have a few more arguments in your quiver to talk about. Data is your company's most important asset. I think that goes without saying, but when we talk about security, we're really not just saying, oh, security is the thing you have to do. We're saying, hey, your data is really important. You need to take steps to protect it. And security is not just the security team's job at Salesforce, right? Every engineer at Salesforce works really hard to make sure we maintain your trust and our product is secure. But it's also, there are things here in your org that you can do, that you can enable to continue to make your org secure. And also, I wish, I know there are a lot of folks out there that tell you, they'll sell you something and tell you it'll make everything secure. It's just not true. There's not one product that makes everything secure. Security is a process. As we'll talk about here, it's going to be things you're going to keep checking over and over again, because nothing is static in this world. Things change. New threats come up. As you hear about every week, there's a new breach. So that's why we want to talk about security. And as you heard at the beginning, I talked about that there are 3 steps, right? So I'm going to talk about another principle in security so you can understand why we're not just telling you to do one thing, but several things. So there's this concept in the security industry called security in depth, or defense in depth. And if you think about our castle, right? Our castle doesn't just rely on its perimeter, right? It's got a moat, and I bet that there are alligators in that moat, right? So if you want to break into that castle, you've got to swim across that moat, you've got to fight off alligators, and then what do you have to do next? There's walls, right? You got to climb up the walls, and then there are going to be guards up there, and then there are going to be more doors and more shutters. And you just think about all the different types of security we just talked about for a castle. It's very much the same way that you want to think about the security of your org. It's not just one thing. If there's one control, it can fail. If you have multiple controls, the odds of all of them failing are much, much less. So that's why we're going to talk about several actions for you to take today. The first one we're going to talk about is health check. What I really like about health check is that it's just a great way for you to quickly get a visualization of the status of the security of your org. It's something we built in because we know security can be challenging. This is what it looks like. See how easy it is to see all the different statuses, and it shows you which are the high-risk settings. And what I love about Health Check is you just go straight in there and you double-click. So you might discover that the password length is a risk that you didn't know about. You go in there, you double-click it, you make it longer, you've increased the security. That's how easy it is. If you've got also interest in seeing a demo of this, my colleagues over on the security booth side, it's over there, we've got a big area, they're there doing demos, and they'd be excited to show it to you. This is how you can find it. You go in and you do a quick search for Health Check. It's also under the security settings, and we highly recommend that you go back after every release to check it at the bare minimum, because there are constantly new features that we introduce, and so there may be some new tools that we've added to improve the security of your org. Two-factor authentication. Is there anybody here who is already using two-factor authentication in your org? That's great, but I'm disappointed that I didn't see all of your hands. So I'm going to go over, and I want lots of questions today at the end of it about why are you not using it? Because we want to make it so everyone can use it. This is really the thing that you can do to enable to have the greatest impact for security on your org. So what is two-factor authentication? It's actually a lot easier than it sounds, but some people call it 2FA. It's really the idea that you don't just have one thing like a password, but you have something else that is going to make it much more challenging for an intruder to get in and steal your data, so that something that you know, that's going to be your password, and then it's going to be something that you have. Sometimes that's a YubiKey. At Salesforce, we use something called the Salesforce Authenticator. It's on our phones. It's really simple. It's a great way. We make it really easy to have that second factor so that we just don't, so if someone steals my password, they can't get in and access my org and all of my data. We use it all day long. All my colleagues do at Salesforce. That's how I know it's really not that big of a burden. YubiKeys are another option. Another thing that you'll see being a two-factor authentication at times is something biometric. It can be your fingerprint and iris scan. Again, the concept is you don't just want it to be your credential. Those are stolen. That's what you often see about in breaches, is credentials being stolen. Again, I mentioned the Salesforce Authenticator. We're so passionate about two-factor authentication that we actually make this freely available. You can download it for your iPhone, for Android devices. It's free. You can use it with all of your accounts. Again, we highly recommend it. My colleagues are here over on the security side to show you how to use it, how to activate it. It's, again, something we can't stress enough. You don't have to use this, but we highly recommend that you have two-factor authentication. This is how you set it up. You go and you look under permission sets. That's where you'll find it. And again, one of the things I've learned working with the security team is that user authentication is one of those key things that can be really challenging. So we've got a trail on it. It's really good. I highly recommend that you take it. So again, it'll provide you with great explanations, because it will change the way people access the Salesforce org, but it adds such a huge security impact that we highly recommend it. And now I'm going to turn it over to Garrett, who will talk about log and IP ranges.
Thank you. So quickly, is anybody using IP whitelisting or log and IP ranges in their org? A decent number of people. Okay. So really quickly, just kind of a quick crash course, if you will. Log and IP ranges is this concept of you only want people interacting with your Salesforce org or your environment from locations in which you trust on an IP basis, not physical locations necessarily, but at least on an IP address level. I get it. Salesforce is a cloud product, right? You want your users to be as flexible as possible, and that's the advantage of cloud products, is that you want users to be able to log into them from anywhere and interact with them. And that's great. However, it's a little bit of a double-edged sword, because while your valid users are allowed to do that, also malicious actors are able to as well. So somebody can be sitting at home guessing logins, or maybe if they find compromised credentials as a result of another breach somewhere, they can try to use those to log into your Salesforce org. And if there isn't that extra barrier, such as maybe two-factor authentication or something like that, it allows them effectively free reign into your environment. It's something that you want to partner with your IT staff on. So they're going to be the ones, they're going to be the experts who know just what IPs you're coming from to interact with your Salesforce org, and so you want to make sure that you partner with them and follow with those, so that way you don't inadvertently lock out valid users, right? Test it in your sandbox before you roll it out to production, obviously. There's two ways in which you can implement it, and it just very much depends on your use case. So you can do it at the org level, which is very much an all or nothing thing. So when you set a set of IP addresses, anyone, any user, any profile, what have you, have to adhere to those same restrictions as anybody else. There's no granularity. It's a very binary sort of thing. However, at the profile level, which is what we recommend, it does take a little bit more work to implement, but it allows you to implement IP whitelisting on a profile level. So it allows you that finer level of granularity. So maybe you have users who don't have as much access to a Salesforce org, or aren't interacting with as sensitive of data. Maybe you want to provide them the ability to be a little bit more flexible in the locations in which they log into Salesforce from. However, your system administrators who have effectively the keys to the kingdom, you really want to make sure that they log in from a list of known trusted locations. Doing this sort of thing at the profile level allows that level of flexibility to kind of tailor just what locations, broad or not, that those users log in from. But one of the best things about it, too, is that you can set this for API users as well. So say you have API integrations or a web application that is interacting with Salesforce. That web application is coming from one IP address. It makes sense to create maybe a custom profile for them and apply those IP whitelisting restrictions just so that way it affects that one web server. So that way, if API tokens do become compromised, whether they're published somewhere or stolen, and whatever, at least there's that additional barrier. So now they have to go after and target maybe that web server in order to be able to interact with your Salesforce environment. They can't just start hammering away at the API from any location. We do have a Trailhead badge that goes into a little bit more detail on exactly how to set it up. It's called the Data Security Badge. It offers a lot of other information about org security as well, more things around how to protect your org once you're inside, things like field level security, stuff like that. But there's also a section on IP whitelisting that it goes into pretty elegantly. And we're also doing demos at the security station if you'd like to chat with a Salesforce engineer and kind of walk through it with them. So there's one more thing while we have a couple of minutes that I want to talk about. Who here has multiple orgs that they interact with? Yeah? Like more than 5? Anyone? Couple? Okay. And X number of sandboxes for each of those orgs, right? So all of these things are great. Like health check is great, two-factor authentication is fantastic, and so is implementing IP whitelisting. But figuring out exactly what sort of the status quo is, what the posture of all of those orgs are, is a very tedious and manual process, right? You have to log into each individual org, do a bunch of button clicking to figure out changes that do or don't need to be made. And we ran into that same problem here at Salesforce. So shocker, we use a lot of orgs, right? Or we have a ton of orgs. I personally, in my day-to-day operations, interact with somewhere between 3 and 5 orgs, and that's just the tip of the iceberg, and we have even more sandboxes on top of that. And so we ran into, a colleague of mine on my team ran into this same issue of how do I get this one sort of location in which I can see the overall health of all of these different orgs. So he wrote a tool, and we open sourced it last year at Dreamforce called OrgMonitor. And it's this idea that you can view the security health of multiple orgs in one pane of glass, whether that's production orgs or sandbox orgs. It also provides hourly updates, so it interacts via a connected app over the API, and so it's querying all of your orgs and sandboxes on an hourly basis, so that way as changes are made, you're going to be able to see that progression within OrgMonitor on a quasi-real-time basis. It's a Node.js app, so anywhere that you can deploy a Node.js app, you can deploy OrgMonitor, whether that's locally on your own developer workstation, on your own on-prem server, or even in Heroku. That's where we run ours internally, is on Heroku. It uses SAML for authentication. So existing single sign-on solutions, you can easily tie it into that so you don't have to worry about standalone credentials. There's also there's an unauthenticated developer mode, so if you're just tinkering around with it, trying to see how the tool works, you don't have to set up a full SAML implementation for it. However, that being said, please don't deploy this in unauthenticated mode in Heroku for anybody to see, right? Like, make sure you have some sort of authentication attached to it if you are going to take advantage of that. But the best part about it is that it's free and open source, so we take pull requests. You're able to pull the code down. There's no cost associated with it. If you have ideas or you have development experience and you implement something into OrgMonitor that's really beneficial to you, chances are somebody else is going to get a lot of benefit from that as well. Please submit that to us so that way we can merge it into and use it internally as well as offer it up to everybody else as well. Some of the things that it looks at, it allows you to provide insight into users that have a lot of sensitive permissions, such as view all data and modify all data. You're able to see what profiles have IP whitelisting restrictions enabled or not. So if you are trying to go through this process of implementing IP whitelisting, this allows you to provide a quick and easy way to see if any profiles have been missed. Users that don't have two-factor authentication. Also, user accounts that don't adhere to your corporate email address scheme. So if you have contractors that were provisioned a Salesforce license, maybe on a temporary basis, this is a really quick and easy way to figure out, maybe identify those contractors who don't adhere to your corporate naming scheme because they're working for that consulting firm, but maybe their accounts weren't deprovisioned when their contract was ended. So it's an easy way to kind of clean up that security debt a little bit. So it's a lot of different tools, features that OrgMonitor provides to you. I highly recommend checking it out if you're having to administrate multiple orgs and sandboxes on a pretty regular basis. And it also provides that percentage baseline for the security health check as well. So if you are just looking for purely the numbers standpoint in health check, this provides you a quick one-stop shop for all of that sort of information as well. A GitHub link is down at the bottom if you want to check the code out. It's in the slides as well that are published online if you want to look at it later. Some security talks that I recommend that are more geared towards entry, like fundamental org admin stuff. If you're interested in OrgMonitor, we have a dedicated talk for that steps you through the entire deployment process of getting it set up as a connected app and integrated with multiple orgs, as well as some common talk on common security mistakes that you can do. If you are interested in implementing SAML, if you've been looking for a project to utilize like Salesforce Identity, for example, OrgMonitor is a fantastic way to sort of dive into looking at single sign-on, and there's a dedicated talk for talking about SAML and how to implement it in a way that's a little more digestible, if you will. And here, if you're really interested in security, these are all of the talks my colleagues are giving throughout the week. Please go check them out. They're on a variety of topics that may be of interest to you. But with that, we've got a couple of minutes left, so we were hoping to do maybe a little bit of Q&A if anybody has any questions. Yep.
Hi, thank you. I'm going to lead the questions. Guys, put your hands together and thank Garrett and Linda first. Yes. You actually have a little more time than 2 minutes, so we'll take as many questions as people have. I saw one back here. Hi. Here you go.
Can you tell us more about how the Salesforce Authenticator works, Linda? That's an app, a mobile app, and you turn it on from the permission sets? Can you describe a little bit more how that works? Is it on a user basis, user by user, like some people have it?
I'll let Garrett.
Yeah. So it's set up as a permission set. So yeah, that is something that you can set up on a user by user basis. Once it's done, it's so there's multiple. So you can set up Salesforce Authenticator as either the app basis, but if you want to look at other like 2FA solutions, so if say you're working in a high security environment where cell phones aren't permitted, you can use YubiKeys such as the that take advantage of the universal two-factor. But yeah, it's as simple as users just downloading the app onto their phones. The pairing process is pretty simple. They just go into their own, once you set the permission set, if you're forcing it on users, the first time they log in, once the permission set has been applied, it forces them to enroll in two-factor. It's a pretty seamless process. The pairing process, you don't have to scan QR codes or anything like that. When you add a new device, there's a two-word phrase that's generated, and they just have to type that into their org, and that's the extent of the pairing process. It's pretty simple. I'm sorry?
How often do you have to do it?
To do the pairing?
Yeah.
The pairing's a one-time process unless somebody loses their phone. But when you, to log in, doing the two-factor, that is an every time you log in sort of thing. But it is pretty elegant with Salesforce Authenticator. You don't have to copy PIN numbers and hope you type them in before they run out every 30 seconds. You can do that if you want. The capability is there. But it's also done purely on a push notification basis. So a user will just get a simple push. They just have to accept it. And if they're using something like Touch ID on an iOS device or something like that, they just apply their thumbprint and they're good to go. So it's it's pretty easy. It's a really elegant solution, in my opinion. That's what we use internally as well.
Yeah. Basically, just what it does is it just pops up on your iPhone. So when you log in, it then pops up. You get an alert on your iPhone or whatever your mobile phone is, and you just it says, "Did you want to log in?" And you just say accept, and that's it, and it does it. So it couldn't be easier to do it. That's why we really encourage everyone to use it.
Yep.
More questions. Here is one. I'm going to reach across to you here.
Hello. So if I work for a company where we're geographically dispersed and we travel a lot.
Yeah.
Would you recommend for the IP restrictions to have a VPN, the two-factor authenticated on the VPN, and then they log in through there, or just have it kind of be delayed to where they have to submit the IP range that they're currently traveling to, or where once they get there?
Right. Yeah. I get you on that one, and you're right. Like there is that sort of lag time, and for a lot of workers that are really mobile. I travel for Salesforce maybe 100 days a year, so I'm in the same boat as they are. We use VPNs. That's the way that we do that. So we have VPN concentrators located in kind of our major geos, and remote users or users that are traveling connect to those VPNs that are whitelisted, and that's how they interact in Salesforce org. That's how they get through the IP whitelisting restrictions.
Thank you.
Yep.
We still have time for some more questions. I know that you guys probably have a lot.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We forever adding IP ranges for our vendors and third parties and plugins and remote users, and we add them and add them and add them. We're over hundreds. Is there any way to measure or to measure usage to start removing them? Or is there best practices?
Yes, but probably not in a very elegant way. Salesforce does capture the login history of every single user that logs into your org, and it's provided to you in a massive CSV file, right? But one of the things that it does capture, it captures browser information, so you can see if users are running outdated versions of browsers. It captures basic, like, are they running on Windows or Mac, that sort of thing. But it also does capture IP addresses. So if you're a spreadsheet ninja, you could at least probably get some sort of vague idea of what that looks like, at least through mining the login history. Yeah, it does for the last 6 months. So not the most elegant solution, but I guess at least better than nothing.
Yeah. Great. Others? You're all satiated? Oh, one more. Last one.
Hi, hello. Working? Okay. Every time
I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
Every time I use a new browser or a new PC, it asks me for a 6-digit code to re-enter. Is that not safe enough?
The text message. It asks for a text message. So SMS interception, or the idea of basically stealing a text message, really used to be like kind of man in a van sort of stuff, if you will. So either not the most practical thing in the world, or really reserved for state-sponsored attacks and stuff like that. However, SMS interception is becoming more and more mainstream nowadays, where paying somebody to clone a SIM card where now you're seeing the exact same data as somebody else is not really reserved for the movies anymore, or state-sponsored stuff. We're seeing it more and more common these days. There was also a pretty recent breach of a big company, and one of the ways that they got in was a lesson learned that they took from it was SMS as a two-factor solution was what killed them effectively. That's how they got in, is the attacker was able to intercept the SMS, the PIN number that was texted to them, and use that to log into their production environment. So I would not recommend that. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's better than nothing, but I would say take it to that next level.
Put your hands together one more time to thank Garrett and Linda. Thanks, guys.